So here we're going to pick option 4 from our menu. And this again is going to give us just a little heads up about that it's installing 040. We can go ahead. Okay, the installation is complete, and you can see there's a series of outputs from the keptn installer that lets you know all the work that it was done. You can see the execution time was only a couple minutes. And then this is output from my scripts that just lets you see some of the things that were produced. So these commands you can run anytime, getting all the pods that were installed as part of the kind of the current setup. We've got some information from Istio here. And this external IP we're going to need to use to configure the domain in Route 53 for AWS. This is something specific to AWS. This is just unique because it's not a single IP address, so it's something unique to AWS. But here you can see some of the services that front end each of the nodes. We can see the deployment files, which are managing these running pods, and then as you can see here, I printed out some output of what needs to be done to update the various things. We need to update our Route 53 DNS. We also then need to manually fix by rerunning one of the internal scripts to keptn to resolve this new updated domain name. And then we're going to reconfigure our CLI here. So we can see now we have successfully installed keptn. So now we're going to move on to install dyntrace. So here it's kind of, again, building my credentials that I've entered in earlier, and it's going to go ahead and pass those into the installer script that comes with keptn, which is basically downloading the one agent operator, rolling it out into my Kubernetes environment. This takes about a minute, so I'm going to pause it again. Okay, so once this was completed, I do have some extra output to let you see, the execution time. It only took about a minute and a half. I can see the pods that are in the namespace dyntrace, and I can see that it's running here. So now that that's complete, we're going to move on to the next step. Now that we've done all the steps here to set up our cluster, install keptn, install the dyntrace one agent operator, now we're going to go on to basically preparing our repos, onboarding the application, and preparing the keptn bridge. So this presumes you have some sort of org already built that's empty. You can see here, this is my org. So I'm going to go ahead and fork these repository scripts. And what this is doing is it's copying the repositories from the keptn orders into my org. It'll first try to delete them if they exist in my org. Since none of them were found, you'll just see those messages. So now we just need to log on to GitHub, and let me do that real quick. I'm going to pause. Okay, now that I've logged in, the cloning is taking place here, and there's actually 4 different repos, and you can see it's done cloning them. If we go back to GitHub, refresh, we can see that it's now forked each of these source code repositories. And this is needed because within each repo are a couple of key files that will be used in keptn, one being the JMeter folder, where these scripts are expected to be there for validating the environment and then running a test. So then also there's a perfspec folder with the perfspec file, which contains the kind of the simple validations I want to do for my each of these microservice apps. So those same folders are there. All this code is not needed for executing keptn. Keptn expects that you're going to have a built image. So you will see that there is a Docker file to build these images. And over in my Docker Hub account, I've published these images here as keptn orders front end, keptn orders customer service, etc. And that's where it's going to pick it up later in the flow. So let's go ahead and onboard our app, which is menu number. going to just re-execute this. If we go back to our repo, go back to my repo here. And this repo will be created, and again with the shipyard file, this is where the Captain installer for onboarding a project will create each of the branches. And if we still configuring here, as this goes on, if we go into a particular branch like dev, there is an initial skeleton of files, but then as the project gets onboarded, the files will be built out here. So we'll just give it a couple more seconds to let this process. Okay, so now it's moved on to the onboarding service. We've successfully created the project. It's now gone through adding the service, configuring it, moving on. Since there's 4, this will happen 4 times. If we go back to our repo and just refresh, you can see that these files are starting to get built out. They're all automatically being created by they onboard the service, and once number 4 is done, these will all be in place. So let's just continue to process. And so this is happening in each branch. There's a production branch which has different files, and if you notice, my deployment strategy was a blue-green in production, so I have a blue-green files, where in dev I just had a direct deployment, so I only have 1 set of files for each service. So okay, so now completely done. And again, gives you a little cheat sheet for how to get back to that project. And so now we're going to do the HA proxy setup. So this is just a utility, if we go ahead and run it, which is going to set up HA proxy on our Bastion host and set it so that we can watch the Captain bridge on port 80 of the Bastion host. So you can see here at the output it says, let's go ahead and run this command. And the best way to do this is to open up a second shell window. And again, we'll just go back to get our connection string for our cluster. So we want to connect back to the Bastion host and connect. Just get my SSH information again. All right, and go to another tab, and we'll go to my directory where my PEM file is. Go ahead and connect. All right, so now we can just take this command here, run it in a second window, and it's just going to sit there in a loop, forwarding kube control to there. Now we can grab this IP address. This is the IP address of my Bastion host. So if we come to a browser, open up a new tab, this is going to prompt you for user ID and password. This is something I programmed into the proxy. So in this case, the user ID is Captain, password is bridge. This can be configurable. And now we're in. And so this is the Captain bridge. This is what it looks like. So if I go back to my terminal, this is all configured now. And now we're ready to go ahead and send an artifact event to deploy our application. So let me just show you, there's a utility here called show the orders app. If I run this, you can see that it's just basically running a series of commands just as a cheat sheet. Lets you see what the URL will be, and then it's running the pods. Since nothing's running yet, there's no resources found. So let's go ahead and do a send event, number 30. And this sometimes the formatting gets messed up, but it's supposed to prompt you. And so we wanted just to deploy front end 1. We'll just skip these other guys. And now this is sending an event, a new artifact event, using this image and this tag. So if we watch the application now, show orders app number 20, we can start to see now in the dev environment, my pods are starting to take place and being deployed. If I switch over to the bridge, now I can refresh the bridge. Now you can see I've got a new pipeline starting, and this is the Captain context ID, which is how all these logs get stitched together. So if we start at the beginning, we can do received this external event for this front end service. I'm starting my pipeline. And then it's going through, and over here on the right you can see the various services that are being involved. So it's Eventually, the one that really starts it is the Helm service. So now it's starting a deployment, and now here we go. Here's the deployment. If we can keep refreshing this to watch the activity. We can also go back here and run the orders app command again, 20, and you can see it's starting to come up. It just takes a little bit. So if we run number 20 again, it will eventually start, and then we can see here, okay, they're two are starting. So now we can take this URL and we can go to another browser window, and it will, yep, there we go. So now it's running. So the application's running. Let me just run this one more time, 20. Yep, so all pods are now running, and you can see now that it's deployed, Keptn's starting to deploy it into my staging environment. And so, but we can just navigate the application, just kind of confirm that it's working properly, and it seems to be working. And so let's see what's happening here. So now once this runs in the staging environment, it will kick off a performance test. So then that will take a couple minutes to run. So I'm gonna pause this so we don't have to watch this. But what I can just show you, there's some other menu items. So at any time you want to look at what's sort of the status of Keptn, you can look here. And again, it's just running a series of commands that you can do with cube control. It's just sort of a cheat sheet, dumps them all out so you don't have to type them all the time. And that's it. So now that this is done, now you see how we set up Keptn and deploy our application. Hope this was helpful. So now that we're done using the environment, now we need to tear it down. So I have a script that's automatically built for this, and we're going to go ahead and run our Keptn orders folder where we've cloned, and I'm on the Bastion host here. And if we run our setup utility, notice one of the menu options is delete our cluster. So go ahead and run delete, and it's actually going ahead and starting and deleting our cluster. So when we run the menu choice, there's a script here called delete cluster. So if we look at this again, it's dealing with the multiple environments. So in the case of EKS, we're using that same EKS CTL utility, and it's basically running delete our cluster. And what is happening within CloudFormation is that utility is creating a CloudFormation script and tearing down the one that it originally makes. So as we monitor this in the events, this deletion process will take place. This takes a good maybe 10 minutes to perform, so I'm going to pause the video. Okay, so now that the cluster is deleted, we can see it only took a couple of minutes to do this, and we're now returned back to our menu. And now at this point we can remove our Bastion host. So we're going to go ahead and get out of this. We're going to go ahead and just exit out of our terminal. And then if you recall back in our README file, if I go back to AWS README, there's a section down here after the create for deleting your Bastion host. So here we have this information, and really all that needs to be done is adjusting this prefix because it's assuming that you didn't change any of these values. And so in my case, I'm going to just, since I've already filled this in with my last name, I'm going to take this script that I have a little cheat sheet for, and copy this, come over to my terminal, go ahead and run this. And if you noticed, I have a little sleep in here after the terminate because if the EC2 instance isn't deleted, this deleting of the security group will fail because of a dependency. So we can actually kind of watch it over here in AWS. If I come to EC2, look at my instances, and you can see here this is the one. It's in the process of shutting down, and then eventually it will be deleted. And we'll let that process for a minute. Not much to watch. And then if we come over here, because it was in shutting down mode, it was able to go ahead and delete the security group. So once this is done, the VM will be terminated and you are complete. And if you ever need to set up the Keptn environment again, you can just follow the same process to build out your environment.